Well, that explains it. It was a peaceful night in Ponyville. After the chaos of T-Rex Rampage, things were finally starting to go back to normal. Unfortunately, the peace was interrupted by a particularly loud scream of frustration that could only have come from a lavender unicorn named Twilight Sparkle.
Twilight, you've been at this for hours, and trying to understand Pinkie Pie is just about impossible anyway,
Spike said as he descended the steps to the castle basement. He found Twilight in the same spot he had left her hours before, after she had decided it was time to finally make sense of Pinkie's nonsense, a task widely viewed as impossible.
I know, Spike, but this is something that must be done,
Twilight replied.
I was willing to let it slide the first time, but then we found out that there are others with the same crazy abilities. First Pinkie, then Discord, then Cheese. There must be a connection. It's probably just a coincidence. It's not like half of Equestria is as strange as them,
Spike said, heading towards the freezer for some ice cream. Before he could get it open, however, the freezer door slammed, smashing Spike against the wall.
Pinkie, what are you doing in here?
Asked a very surprised Twilight.
Pretending to be ice cream?
Pinkie literally bounced out of the freezer.
Have you seen Spike? Right here,
came a muffled groan from behind the door. Pinkie closed the freezer, revealing a flat, purple and green mass.
So that's why my Pinkie sense was telling me to watch out for opening doors?
Pinkie said as she attempted to unflatten the dragon. At that exact moment, her tail started twitching. Pinkie got out of the way just in time. Spike was not so lucky, and any attempt to make him 3D again were quickly undone as a random flower pot fell out of thin air. Twilight looked up to see the grinning face of Discord.
Discord!
She screamed.
That was priceless! Simply priceless!
He said between fits of uncontrollable laughter. Seconds later, Discord's tail started twitching and another flower pot came down on his head, putting an end to his laughter. Noticing this, an idea came to Twilight's mind.
Discord, does your tail always twitch just before something falls?
She asked.
It does, actually.
Discord's reply was all the evidence Twilight needed. She whispered something in Pinkie's ear.
I have a surprise for you, Discord. Follow me,
Pinkie said. Discord took the bait. As Discord entered the doorway, Twilight used her magic to slam the door on his face, knocking him back. Just before the impact, Twilight noticed Discord's body perform the same combo as Pinkie and a look of shock appearing on his face.
How rude,
Discord muttered as he tried to fix his now flat face.
Discord, I noticed that you and Pinkie seem to share some abilities. Do you know how this could have happened?
Twilight turned to Pinkie.
You can answer too if you know anything.
When both Discord and Pinkie said they had no clue why they had the same powers, Twilight decided it was time to do some research. The next day, she invited Discord and Pinkie to her castle, claiming that she had found something.
Good morning, both of you. Now, I bet you're wondering why I called you here today. Well, it's because after some research...
Twilight was interrupted as a pink blur shot past her, slamming her against the wall.
You found out that the Pie family was descended from a pony named Cheesecake, and he was the first known pony to have these kind of powers?
Pinkie asked, speaking so fast that most of her words seemed to blend together into one very long word.
How did you know?
Twilight lifted herself off the ground.
Just a hunch.
Twilight was speechless for almost a full minute. When she was finally able to speak, she said,
Pinkie is right. Cheesecake was the first known pony to exhibit these powers. Even better, we've solved Cheese Sandwich. Cheesecake has two folds, Cheeseburger and Cheese Pie. Cheese Sandwich is descended from Cheeseburger, while Cheese Pie had a daughter named Apple Pie, and Apple Pie's children formed the Apple family and the Pie family.
Pinkie was so excited she started bouncing around the room, crashing into just about everything before landing on Twilight. Neither of them noticed that Discord had been unusually quiet this whole time, until Pinky asked,
Wait, so what does this have to do with Discord?
As they both turned towards him, they realized he looked very sheepish.
Tell us what you know, Discord.
Well, you see... Cheesecake was me disguised as a pony.
He blurted out.
What?
Well, the Draconicus king sent me to spy on Equestria, and my disguise as a pony was named Cheesecake.
You were Cheesecake.
Twilight's eye twitched.
You were Cheesecake. And you didn't think to mention it sooner?
She shouted as her eyes twitched uncontrollably.
Slipped my mind.
That was the last straw. There was an extremely loud scream of
Discord!
coming straight from the Castle of Friendship just before all of Ponyville was obliterated by a massive wall of purple magic. 5 hours later, Princess Celestia looked upon the ruins of Ponyville from her balcony in Canterlot.
Good thing we were able to evacuate the entire town before it met its unfortunate end,
came the voice of Princess Luna. Celestia only nodded before replying.
Indeed, Twilight can overreact to just about anything. Well, learning that one of your best friends is a descendant of one of the most tyrannical rulers of all time can have that effect. True, but it was still rather amusing.
With a smile, Princess Luna replied.
Agreed.
Author's note. This is the first thing I've ever written. Any constructive criticism is welcome. Vinyl's heritage. Unexpected revelation. Octavia let out a long sigh as she tossed a small stack of papers on the coffee table. She grabbed her glass of wine before leaning back in the couch.
More bills?
Vinyl Scratch asked as she flopped down next to Octavia, tossing her shades onto the table. She draped a foreleg around Octavia's shoulders.
Don't worry about it, I got another gig in a couple of days.
Octavia took a sip before replacing her cup and resting her head on Vinyl's shoulder.
Worse, it's my parents. Believe it or not, they want to meet you,
she said, shaking her head a bit.
I can't tell you how critical they've been about me dating another mayor. I'm afraid if they actually meet you, well... Hey, what's not to like?
Vinyl replied.
I'm good to ya, I love ya, and we're happy together. That's all that really matters. Well, yes, try explaining that to my parents. Of course I love you, but they might see you as... something of an embarrassment.
Vinyl nodded.
I know what you're talking about. My parents can be super critical. It's always such a pain.
Octavia blinked before pushing herself up to look Vinyl in the eye.
What do your parents think of me?
Vinyl burst out laughing.
Oh man,
she said, trying to stifle her laughter.
No, my parents don't even know I'm seeing any pony.
Octavia's eyes widened as her mouth fell open. She snapped her mouth shut, settling on a slight frown as she glared at Vinyl. We've been together for months. Why wouldn't you have told your parents about me? Are you ashamed of me? Vinyl got up, waving her hoofs.
No, it's nothing like that, Tavi. It's just... well, I don't really keep in touch with my folks, that's all.
Leaning forward, Octavia retrieved her wine glass, finishing it off with a single swallow.
You still should have at least mentioned me. No way.
Vinyl shook her head.
It's way more trouble than it's worth, trust me. What?
Octavia leapt to her hoofs, glaring at Vinyl.
You are ashamed of me. No, it's just...
Vinyl scratched face-hoofed.
You wouldn't understand, Octi. Can't we just forget about this?
Octavia grabbed her wineglass before storming past Vinyl, swishing her tail at her.
Fine. Come on, Octi, don't be like that.
Vinyl called after her as Octavia stormed into the kitchen. An angry clattering of glass was the only reply she received.
Smooth, Vinyl,
she muttered to herself as she hung her head. With a sigh, Vinyl trotted over and meekly peeked into the kitchen. With her ears folded back, she put on her most pathetic look.
I'm sorry, Octavia. Come on, let's talk about it. Talk about what?
Octavia's tone was sharp and critical.
I'm sorry,
Vinyl said as Octavia again brushed by her. Octavia marched straight for their bedroom. Opening the door, she turned to look back at Vinyl.
Prove it!
She punctuated her shout by slamming the door.
Fine, I will!
Vinyl shouted back. The morning light filtered in, landing on Octavia's face. She muttered as she sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She looked over to find the rest of the bed still made.
Not again.
Rolling out of bed, Octavia made a beeline for the couch. Vinyl wasn't there either. Octavia let out a frustrated groan as she moved to the kitchen.
I swear, if she's gone and passed out at another bar, oh, what I'll do to her,
she said aloud as she put on a pot of coffee.
And then she's just going to expect me to check every seedy little place in Canterlot and drag her home. Well, I'm not doing it this time.
Some. Octavia groaned and rolled her eyes at the sound of hoofbeats on her door.
You even managed to lock yourself out?
She shouted as she trotted over. Opening the door, she found a well-groomed stallion. His ebony hair matched perfectly with his grey coat and black suit. Even his posture was flawless. Octavia blushed as she ran a hoof across her mane.
Oh, I thought you were some pony else,
she said.
I must look aside.
Quite, the grey unicorn replied in a haughty tone. I have simply come to deliver you this. He floated a sealed scroll to Octavia. Good day, Miss Melody.
Good day,
Octavia called after the retreating stallion before closing the door. She looked at the ornate scroll in her hoof.
How odd.
Her efforts to break the seal were interrupted by the intoxicating scent of fresh brewed coffee. Making a beeline for the coffee pot, she set the scroll aside in exchange for a coffee cup. After stirring in just the right amount of sugar, she picked up the scroll again and headed back to the couch. Finally managing to break the seal, she unfurled the scroll as she sat down.
Hi, Tavi. Thanks to you, I'm stuck here at my folks' place. But hey, at least you're going to get your way. They want you to come by for dinner tonight. You don't have to come, though, really. They'll send a car to our apartment at 5 to pick you up. Make sure you're ready on time. My folks are real sticklers about that sort of thing. Anyway, don't forget you still have the option not to come. Seriously, Octi, don't come. The DJ, Vinyl Scratch.
Octavia put her coffee down as she reread the letter.
Sent a card?
She wondered.
Vinyl never struck me as some pony whose parents were well-to-do.
She shook her head, dismissing it. It didn't matter. She would simply wear her bow tie and be on her best behavior. It couldn't be anywhere near as bad as Vinyl kept making it out to be. Of course, Vinyl got the time wrong. Whether it was intentional or just her normal, blasé attitude was any pony's guess, but Octavia noticed the cart pulling up over an hour early. At first, she wasn't even sure it was the right cart. The ivory cart gleamed with gold trim, pulled by a quartet of identical, immaculate stallions. After it pulled up, the door opened to reveal the same stallion from that morning. Recognizing him, Octavia rushed out to greet him, thanking her lucky stars that she was properly groomed and dressed this time. Sorry, I wasn't expecting you so soon, she said, trotting up to the cart. Miss Melody, he said, extending a hoof to help Octavia into the cart. She sat down, the door shut, and the cart started off. Octavia looked around the roomy cart in a daze. The inside was just as luxurious as the outside. Red velvet and posh padding adorned the seats and walls. There was even a minibar in the cart. After gawking for some time, it occurred to her that she was being rude. Clearing her throat, she spoke up. My, I wasn't expecting such an extravagant cart. Only the best for the mistress. Tilting her head a bit, she raised an eyebrow. Mistress? He breathed out a measured sigh. You may address her as Vinyl Scratch. Oh, so you're like her butler? Octavia held up a hoof. I'm the mistress's personal servant. You may call me Gray. Octavia let out a nervous giggle. You know, I never knew Vinyl's family was so affluent. Gray raised an eyebrow. Surely, madam, you jest. Octavia shook her head. I really had no idea. You are telling me that you do not know who the mistress is? No, I mean, not really, Octavia responded, a hoof tracing circles across the silken fabric of the seat. You know, now that I think about it, she's always been very close when it came to talking about her family, she said as the cart came to a halt, urging Gray to get up and exit. He stood by the door, offering a hoof to help Octavia out. Well, madam, I can certainly assume that you are in for quite the surprise, he said as he assisted Octavia. As she stepped free from the cart, her pupils shrank as her eyes widened. Why are we at the castle? After being led through countless ornate halls, Gray asked Octavia to wait in a luxurious sitting room. Octavia focused on a nearby couch. It was made of exotic fabrics she couldn't even identify, and the frame looked to be made of jewel-encrusted gold. She reached out a hoof, pausing momentarily before pressing it into the silky fabric. It was as plush and soft as it appeared. Is Vinyl's family really this well off? She wondered as she hoisted herself up onto the couch. Maybe I should have dressed up more. The door slammed open, startling Octavia enough to send her onto the floor.
Tavi! I thought I told you not to come!
Octavia looked up to see what appeared to be some facsimile of her girlfriend, but this version of Vinyl didn't have a messy mane and a pair of shades. This Vinyl had her mane neatly pulled back and wore an extravagant red dress. Vinyl? Octavia said, her voice laced with wonder and disbelief.
I even told you the wrong time so you'd miss a cart!
Octavia trotted over, marveling over Vinyl. I don't understand, Vinyl. I had no idea your family was so... just... wow. She let out a little laugh. It's almost like I'm dreaming. The next thing you know, you'll be telling me you're a princess or something. Ah, no, nothing like that. Vinyl dismissed the notion with a wave of her hoof.
I'm kind of like a duchess, I think,
she said, raising a hoof to her chin.
Well, my mom's a duchess, so whatever.
Octavia's eye twitched.
You're related to the royal family? Yeah, something about us being descendants of Princess Platinum or something,
Vinyl said, waving a hoof as she rolled her eyes.
More to the point, what in the hay are you doing here? I told you not to come! Why?
Octavia asked, a sharpness in her voice.
You didn't want me to meet your family? No, you didn't want your family to meet me!
She frowned as she glared at Vinyl.
You're ashamed of me!
In an instant, Vinyl was at her side, draping a foreleg around her withers.
No, Octi, never. It's just... Look, my parents are not going to like you, especially my mom. She's gonna meet you and she's gonna insist that I dump you. No joke.
Pardon the intrusion, mistress, but I'm obligated to inform you that the Duchess's dinner is scheduled to begin in an hour, Gray said as he entered the room. Vinyl groaned as she rolled her eyes.
Please tell me you didn't tell her Octi was here.
My apologies, mistress, but the Duchess has already been informed of your guest's arrival. Vinyl face-huffed before turning to glare at Octavia.
Why didn't you stay home?
Well, forgive me for taking an interest in my girlfriend's life, Octavia replied, an angry tone in her voice. When were you going to tell me about all of this? Were you going to tell me about all of this? Vinyl rubbed her neck as she averted her gaze.
I don't know. Probably after we were married or something.
Octavia took a small step back. Why would you wait until then?
It'd be too late for them to do anything about it,
Vinyl replied. Mistress, the Duchess intends to speak with you before dinner. Gray spoke up again. Might I suggest accommodating your date more properly?
Vinyl
rolled her eyes.
Come on, Tavi. We gotta get you dressed.
Vinyl and the butler started off, leaving a baffled Octavia trailing after them. A few dizzying halts and 2 flights of stairs later, they ended up in a room not too different from what she'd expected from Vinyl. The immaculate cleanliness aside. Granted, everything was opulent, but the walls were covered in posters of bands and DJs. There was even a DJ booth taking up a large portion of the room. Vinyl threw open a nearby door, revealing a massive walk-in closet.
Gray, what do you think will go with Tavi's mane and eyes?
With all due respect, all of your formal wear is custom-made. It is unlikely to fit any pony else, Gray said as he followed Vinyl and Octavia into the massive closet.
Then go get the tailor to fix it,
Vinyl said as she used her magic to sift through the dresses.
What do you think, Octi? Blue? Lavender?
Octavia watched Gray leave before turning back to Vinyl.
What's gotten into you?
She asked with a pointed tone.
What do you mean?
Vinyl asked as she got a dress and held it up to Octavia. She shook her head before tossing it aside and grabbing another. Placing a hoof on Vinyl's shoulder, Octavia got her to stop and look at her.
Gray was just trying to help you and you were so rude to him. Vinyl, I've never seen you like this.
Vinyl hung her head, looking away from Octavia. Breathing out a long sigh, she looked back at Octavia.
There's a good reason I left this place. A lot of good reasons,
she said, pulling a hoof through her own mane.
Remind me to apologize to him when he gets back, okay? That's not an answer,
Octavia said, staring hard at the sheepish DJ.
Every pony here acts like that. I hate it,
Vinyl said, busying herself with the racks of clothing.
And I hate that I started acting like them too.
Then don't, Octavia replied, stepping in front of Vinyl. She reached up, messing up her mane until it resembled its usual, sloppy self. She kissed Vinyl as she easily undid the dress, letting it fall to the floor. She pulled back, a smile on her muzzle.
That's more like the mare I love.
Vinyl gave her a grin in turn.
Oh, Mom is going to hate your guts.
She gave Octavia a quick peck before galloping into her room. She opened a nearby drawer, levitating her shades onto her face. Octavia pressed a hoof to her own chest.
If she doesn't like me for who I am, well, that's her problem.
Vinyl's grin faded away.
Well, actually, she's gonna make it our problem too. She's let me slide for this long, but I never told her that my roommate was more than my roommate, you know?
A grey hoof found Octavia's face.
Vinyl, why?
She sighed, shaking her head.
You know, I always let it pass how you dodged questions about your parents.
Maybe I shouldn't have. Octavia raised an eyebrow as Vinyl's posture stiffened and she hastily removed her shades. You shouldn't have. A stern voice sounded from behind her. Octavia turned to see a towering, white mare. She had a fiery mane that spilled over her shoulders and a pair of red eyes glaring in her direction. Octavia put on a nervous smile.
Mother, what brings you here unannounced?
Vinyl asked. My eldest daughter is home for the first time in over a year, and I'm not permitted to visit her as I please. Vinyl hung her head a bit.
My apologies, Mother.
The Duchess turned her glare back to Octavia. So, you are the siren that has led my daughter astray. Octavia gave her an uneasy smile. Actually, she was even wilder when we first met, she said. I've done well to rein her in. When the Duchess's frown turned into a scowl, Octavia mentally kicked herself. I just meant, do you not understand who my daughter is? What position she holds? The Duchess asked, stepping forward to tower over Octavia. A meek headshake was the only indication that Octavia had heard her. Vinyl is my firstborn daughter. It is her royal duty to continue our bloodline.
Let my brother do that,
Vinyl intervened.
Hey, I would bet he's already sired several.
You are my daughter. Our bloodline rests on your shoulders and you know that, the Duchess said, her voice sharp and critical. Your father has insisted that you choose your own path in life, but you cannot forsake your family and your duty. I won't allow it.
Mother,
I believed that if you got it out of your system that you would come to your senses, and I knew that when you were ready for motherhood that your maternal instincts would bring you back here to raise your foals in the best possible environment. She turned, glaring again at Octavia. But it seems that the debauchery outside these walls have lured you into some sort of solid affair with this harlot.
Hey!
Vinyl stomped a hoof.
Don't talk about Octi like that!
The Duchess's ears folded back as she stared hard at her daughter. Watch your tongue!
What, yours?
Vinyl retorted.
Tavi's the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's nice and funny and clever and...
A commoner! A mare! An earth pony! Her mother shouted back at her. She squared up to Vinyl, glaring down at her. She is beneath you! Octavia snorted, a wild grin on her face. I'll have you know that I'm usually the one on top. The Duchess whipped around, fire in her eyes as she stomped up to Octavia. You defiled my daughter! I should send you to the gallows!
Tavi, don't.
No, I wasn't so lucky as to be Vinyl's first, Octavia said, matching the Duchess's glare with one of her own. But I tell you this much, Duchess. I fully intend to be her last. Vinyl's mother seized, her chest heaving in and out. Out! After a moment she stomped a hoof before pointing it to the door. Get out! You are not welcome here! Octavia glanced over at a slack-jawed Vinyl before turning back to the Duchess. Fine. She trotted over to Vinyl, reaching a hoof behind her head as she drew her into a kiss. I'll see you at home, Vinyl, she whispered to her. Guards! The Duchess shouted. Guards! In a flash, 2 Pegasi leapt into the room. She pointed a hoof at Octavia. Remove this menace at once! See to it that she never sets hoof on these grounds again! The guards grabbed Octavia, dragging her from the room and the castle. The next thing she knew, Octavia was being tossed out on the curb. She breathed out a sigh as she dusted herself off and straightened her mane. Well, that was foolish. She looked around, seeing little more than a long road leading away from the castle. Great, a long walk home to reflect on my stupidity. Groaning, she started walking.
Tavi!
Octavia froze. She blinked in recognition before turning to see Vinyl galloping towards her. Vinyl crashed into her, wrapping her up in a hug. Vinyl took a step back, grinning at Octavia.
You are officially my hero. The way you stood up to my mom was freaking awesome!
A slight blush painted Octavia's cheeks as she averted her gaze.
It was more foolish than anything. She was just saying those things as if I weren't even there, and I saw red and I just snapped. Octi, no one has ever stood up to my mom like that, not even my dad. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Vinyl said, throwing a leg over Octavia's shoulders. Octavia leaned into Vinyl.
Still, I can't help but feel like I've opened a proverbial can of worms. Oh yeah, definitely,
Vinyl said as she withdrew her hoof, though she kept Octavia right next to her.
You wouldn't believe how much influence my mom has around Canterlot. What are we going to do?
Octavia asked. Vinyl chuckled a bit as she nuzzled Octavia.
Well, first I was thinking of taking you home and showing you just how awesome I think you are.
Octavia nuzzled her in turn.
That sounds heavenly. Then? Well, maybe we should leave Canterlot.
Octavia recoiled.
What, leave Canterlot? You cannot be serious. My position in the orchestra probably won't be there tomorrow,
Vinyl said, rubbing her neck.
My mom's gonna have it out for you, and she's gonna try and make both of us as miserable as possible.
Octavia breathed a heavy sigh as her ears drooped down.
I suppose I only have myself to blame.
She kicked the ground underneath her hoofs.
Hey!
Vinyl threw a leg around Octavia again, pulling her close.
Don't let her get to you. That's just what she wants.
With a small whimper, Octavia pulled Vinyl into a hug.
I'm such an idiot. Come on, don't be like that,
Vinyl whispered as she ran a hoof through Octavia's mane.
Isn't it romantic? Two young lovers hitting the road to find their own place in the world? The place we've had suited us just fine. I know.
Vinyl kissed Octavia's forehead.
I know.
Octavia chuckled just a bit.
Never thought I'd say this, but you were right. I should have left your family alone.
Vinyl shook her head before resting her chin atop Octavia's head so that Octavia could bury her face in her chest.
This was bound to happen sooner or later. A little warning would have been nice. You know, like, oh, and by the way, I'm royalty. In my experience, ponies treat you differently when they find out you're royalty,
Vinyl replied, stroking Octavia's mane.
Nice to know you're still treating me like the idiot I am.
Octavia pulled back, a thin smile on her face.
You've more than earned it. Yeah, just wait until I show you what you've earned,
Vinyl replied, giving her a nudge. Octavia gave Vinyl a quick kiss on the cheek.
Let's go home. Sure thing, Octi.
As they walked together, Octavia glanced over at Vinyl.
You know, you still have to meet my parents. Let's see, my parents are royalty, so let me guess. Your folks are like mafiosos or something.
Vinyl laughed a bit as she looked over at Octavia. She just looked away.
Octi, I was joking.
Octavia kept her gaze averted as she continued to walk in silence.
Come on, say something.
Hello every pony, it's comment time again, and as always I will remind you that you can support me via my Patreon. The link is in the description. Every dollar helps and is much needed and appreciated. Now, what do I have to say about this chapter? Basically, it's a very funny backstory for Vinyl Scratch. I really liked that part where Octavia was standing up to Vinyl's mother, because that is awesome. Standing up to your spouse's parents can be very hard. but she managed, and she did it brilliantly. That one sentence, "I'll have you know that I'm usually the one on top," that was awesome. Also that thing with, "I wasn't so lucky as to be Vinyl's first, but I intend to be her last," was priceless. So, this story was actually read on a live stream on the 29th of February 2016. There are currently 9 viewers on this live stream as far as I can see. Yes, 9 viewers. So, I will put a link to the live stream in the description down below if you want to see my wackiness. So, here of you whenever this comes out or the next story comes out. So, I'm visualbrony and I'm signing off. Luna's turn. Please. It was a calm evening on a Saturday. Most of Canterlot was peacefully enjoying the sunset while the rest did their own little hobbies such as playing outside, meeting up with friends, or just napping. Saturday was usually a calm day for Canterlot. Despite the streets still having a few ponies walking around, it was fairly noticeable that it was less noisy during that time. As for the princesses, they also had a fairly large window for a break before getting back to their duties. Celestia rested in her bedroom, serenely reading one of the many books she had in her chambers. Twilight was there too. She was sitting on a pillow, next to her bed, also reading a book, Daring Do and the False Jewel to be exact. Next to Twilight was one of her own guards, otherwise known as an Afterglow guard. Dawn Sight, Twilight's personal guard, was one of the first and best ponies to serve Twilight at the moment. He's also close friends with the other princesses' personal guards who are, in fact, also in the very same room. Night Shift, Luna's guard, and Captain Solar, Celestia's guard, were chatting a bit. Solar was congratulating Shift for his wedding, and he also talked about his future plans for his family, all the while keeping a close eye on the princesses. However, all 5 ponies were startled as they heard some pony slam the door open and walk towards Celestia with a huge grin on her face. It was Luna.
"Huzzah, Celestia! We has arrived in thy chambers!"
The guards sighed in relief at the sight of Luna and sheathed their weapons. Celestia glanced at her sister.
"Oh, Luna, could you do me a favor and not talk that way? I think it's getting pretty old."
Luna nodded happily.
"Of course! You are the best pony in Equestria after all!"
Celestia suddenly suspected something.
"Okay."
She sighed.
"What have you done wrong now, Lulu?"
Luna seemed shocked.
"Me? Wrong? Ha! Why would your sister do anything wrong?"
Celestia was still unamused. She raised her eyebrow, which ultimately led Luna to spilling the beans. Luna sighed.
"I want to send you to the sun."
Luna's words attracted the attention of all 3 of the guards. Twilight, however, didn't seem to care. Probably because the book was too interesting for Twilight to even notice. Celestia was a bit shocked.
"Luna, you're not going to turn into Nightmare Moon again, right?" "No, of course not! I would never do such a thing again!"
She shook her head.
"I just find it a tad bit unfair that, I needed to stay up there for a whole
You don't need to explain, Luna," Celestia interrupted.
"I understand."
Luna was surprised. She thought she needed to do a whole lot of explanation to Celestia. Apparently not.
"You do?"
she asked, just to be sure. Celestia nodded.
"I just wasn't sure. And I was kinda hoping for you not to banish me."
Luna felt a bit embarrassed while the guards were just in plain shock. Twilight, however, seemed perfectly calm. Luna pulled herself together. She cleared her throat. I just want to banish you for 2 hours. Luna felt utterly weirded out for saying that. Never had she thought she would say that in such a calm tone. 2 hours would be nice. It seemed Twilight just finished her book. Both of the princesses, as well as the guards, looked at Twilight. What? She asked. I finished my book. They decided to just shrug it off and continue the banishment plans. Celestia nodded. Very well, 2 hours it is. So we better start the...
Actually, ma'am, Captain Solar said. When Luna banishes you, does that mean that I'm supposed to resort to violent actions towards Night Shift?
Night Shift flinched, knowing full well Solar is more experienced in close combat. Celestia looked confused. Why would you do that?
Well, it's simply because we are supposed to wage war against the one who banishes or causes harm or negative effects on you.
Well, don't do it for this banishment then. Solar shook his head.
But it specifically says in the guard's manual that...
You have a guard manual? Celestia asked. She didn't remember assigning the guards with a manual. It was probably Prince Blueblood who did it. She'll have to talk to him about that later. Before Solar could answer, Celestia said, Never mind, it isn't important. Let's get this over with.
So I'll attack Night Shift and Dawnstar, right?
Solar asked, still not 100% sure of what he needed to do when Luna banishes Celestia.
Why would you attack me?
Dawn asked, slightly confused and scared.
Well, because you're clearly not doing anything.
Celestia clapped her hoofs. Okay, we need to clear things up. When Luna banishes me, Solar will not attack Night Shift and Dawn's side.
Why me?
Dawn was beginning to get agitated. Let me finish, Celestia ordered. Okay, so after Solar attacks Night Shift and Dawn, Luna will surely attack Solar, and then after that... Oh, can I attack any pony? Twilight raised a hoof. Celestia was slightly confused once again. Why do you want to attack some pony? Well, because if some pony attacks my personal guard, I think the logical thing to do is to attack that pony who attacked the pony who was attacking the pony who attacked him. Which is the pony that I'll be attacking. Solar stepped towards Twilight.
No, Twilight. Dawn is surely going to be dead when you realize it.
Dawn trembled a bit.
So what I think you should do is, after I attack Dawn, you try to attack Shift and then attack me.
Wait, now I'm confused. Night Shift scratched his head. If Solar attacks Dawn first, why would you want to attack me? I'll have to attack you to give you a reason to attack me, and then you can attack Solar. He was in deep thought. Or maybe I attack Luna. Why would you want to attack me? You're my personal guard, Luna asked. I know, but if I attack you, it would surely give the impression that I'm a psychopath, which would give Twilight full reason to attack me and then Solar. Look, Celestia said, finishing her piece of cake she was eating the whole time. I can't be trapped in the burning sun while all of you are messing up the 2-hour war.
You're right.
Solar began to understand.
I'll go order the rest of the guards to attack themselves.
Wait, what? That doesn't make any... Before Celestia could finish her sentence, Solar already took off to the hallway at maximum speeds. Welp, I guess we're going to have some explaining to do. There was silence in the room for a few seconds. As they all took in the peace and quiet of no one arguing for that little amount of time, Luna came to a conclusion. Sister, Luna said. Celestia turned to her. Yes? I realized something. Oh? Celestia was surprised. What is it? Luna hesitated a bit, but not long after she spoke. I realized that the important thing isn't what people did to you in the past, but what people think of you in the present. You may have banished me to the moon for an unfair amount of time, but it's already spilt milk. It's in the past and it's unchangeable. But I think what we really need to focus on is the present and the future. What we can change, what we are able to change, and what we want to change.
Celestia smiled.
You're right, Luna. I am forever grateful for your to the sun!
Luna aimed her horn at Celestia. Celestia backed off.
Wait!
Celestia's attempt to stop Luna was useless, as hundreds of thousands of sparks appeared from Luna's horn and blasted the rainbow-colored aura towards Celestia. Sparks filled her body for a few seconds, shortly before the magical power vanished along with Celestia's body, which was surely to be on the sun. Or in the sun. The two remaining guards stood there with their eyes opened fully and their mouths agape. They weren't sure what to do. Twilight was also surprised and shocked.
Luna, are you sure Celestia will be there for only 2 hours?
Luna turned to Twilight, nodding and chuckling.
Of course! I modified the spell to only have her be banished for 2 hours.
Twilight trusts Luna, but she only wanted to make sure of everything.
May you explain to me how you changed the time exactly?
Luna grinned.
Of course!
She cleared her throat.
You see, the system that the banishment spell uses to calculate how much time a pony or thing is banished is used in hours. 8,760,000 is the amount of hours in 1,000 years. Therefore, I simply just needed— Please don't tell me you put the number 2 in the spell.
Twilight had her hoofs covering her face.
Why yes, I did put 2. Since I want to banish her for 2 hours.
Twilight started freaking out.
Do you even know when the banishment spell was first made?
Luna seemed to get a bit worried all of a sudden.
No, actually...
Twilight held Luna by the shoulders.
It was made over 100,000 years ago. They didn't use our time system then. They used the ocular chromosome time. 2 hours their time wasn't 2 hours our time. An hour was used to calculate every millennium. So?
Luna backed off a bit.
What are you trying to say?
Twilight hesitated in fear of the words that will be coming out of her mouth. Finally, enough time had passed. She spoke, way too scared to even shout.
You just banished Celestia for 2,000 years in the sun.
There was a silence in the room for a while. Both princesses were just in plain shock. Not knowing what to do, Dawn leaned towards Nightshift. I guess we should start the war now? Nightshift nodded and then punched Dawn in the face, knocking him out instantly. He smiled and patted himself on the back. 1-0 Nightshift. Author's note. Hey, thanks for reading. I came up with this idea after a conversation with somebody. We are simply talking about Celestia and Luna and what they are capable of. Then it hit me. I asked myself, if Celestia can banish Luna to the moon, who says Luna can't do the same to Celestia? And that's how I came up with this idea. Again, thanks for reading and have a nice day. Hello everyone, it's comment time once again, and as always I will remind you that you can support me via my Patreon. The link is in the description. Every dollar helps, is needed and very much appreciated. So, this story was read also on the 29th of February on my End of Hiatus livestream part 1. For everyone who was there, hope you enjoyed it. For everyone who was not there, there's a link in the description to that particular live stream of mine. And yeah, what can I say about this story? It was so damn random and so damn funny that I laughed my head off here. It was like these guards. So yes, should I attack him and you attack him, and it was awesome. It was really awesome. Sincerely yours, Visual Pony. See you next time. Pinkie Pie's pancake pronouncement. Pancakes. Pinkie yawned, stretching her front legs out as the last vestiges of sleep slipped away. This bit of morning ritual completed, it was only a matter of milliseconds before she jerked into a standing position, jumped off the bed, and headed down the stairs to see what was for breakfast. As always, she had a huge smile on her face, ready to brighten the day of any pony who happened to be downstairs. Of course, this was almost invariable Mr. and Mrs. Cake, their two small fillies, and no pony else. But that didn't affect her enthusiasm one bit. She loved the Cakes like they were family, and she knew that seeing a smile at breakfast was always the best way to start the day on the right hook. And today was no exception. Upon seeing Pinkie's smiling face, Mr. and Mrs. Cake's faces lit up, unable to suppress small smiles even though Pound Cake had just made a large mess by spilling his breakfast all over the floor. As Mrs. Cake moved to clean the mess up, Mr. Cake grabbed a plate of pancakes from where it was cooling on the counter and set it on the table for Pinkie. Bon appetit, he said with a small chuckle, and she took a seat.
Pancakes!
Pinkie exclaimed.
My favorite!
She licked her lips in anticipation. The Cake's pancakes were always so yummy, and she was one of the only ponies outside the family who ever got to enjoy them. Though they ran a bakery offering all sorts of delicious dessert-style cakes, there had never really been any occasion to sell their pancakes to any pony else. Their divine flavor was known only to a select few, of which Pinkie was glad to consider herself a member. Picking up her fork with her hoof, she cut off the first bite, closing her eyes and bringing it slowly towards her wide-open, salviating mouth. To an onlooker, it might have seemed almost like the action a mother would take when trying to feed an unruly foal.
Here comes a chariot! Open up!
But unlike the foal in this instance, Pinkie was merely savoring the thought of that incredible moment when she would finally feel the incomparable delight which only a cake pancake could impart. If you don't hurry up, the pancakes are going to get cold, Mr. Cake finally told Pinkie after a solid 6 or 7 minutes had passed, the fork still moving ever closer to her mouth, but doing so at what would be best described as the approximate speed of an intoxicated snail. Cold pancakes? That wouldn't do. Sure, she could just warm them back up if necessary, but something would be lost in the process. Some indescribable characteristic which only fresh out of the pan pancakes could embody. Perhaps the Cakes could make some more, but Sugar Cube Corner would be opening before long, so they probably needed to be getting ready for that soon. Besides, not eating the pancakes that she already had in front of her would be a terrible, inexcusable waste. Taking a deep breath, Pinkie sobered up that snail and rushed the fork the rest of the way to her mouth. For the smallest of all possible moments, Pinkie remained perfectly still. Then, with her eyes closed, she began moving the bite of pancake around in her mouth, chewing with intense concentration. And then she swallowed. The entire Cake family, even the 2 fillies, paused what they were doing to look at Pinkie, bracing for the inevitable explosion that was about to erupt. And erupt it did.
That was fantastic!
She shouted in absolute ecstasy, her eyes abruptly flickering open and her form involuntarily leaping out of her seat. Her legs spread out in all directions as she flew into the air, her mane gently brushing against the ceiling of the kitchen as she reached the apex of her jump. As though she had done this a million times before, she expertly maneuvered her legs in the air, cat-like reflexes allowing her to land right back on her feet. Or in this case, her seat.
These are the most fabulous, unparalleled, celebration-worthy king-like flapjacks ever!
She screamed.
Forget, these pancakes are amazing as fuck!
This said, she finally began to eat the rest of her plate of pancakes at a more typical pace, pausing only a few times to shiver with near-orgasmic pleasure at how delectable they were. Leaving Pinky to it, the cakes glanced at each other, carefully took their fillies from their seats, and walked into the adjoining room, each wondering if he or she should say something. It seemed clear that Pinky either didn't realize what she had just said, or didn't understand its significance. Mrs. Cake slowly removed her hoofs from Pound Cake's ears, but the damage had already been done.
Fuck!
Pound Cake said proudly.
Fuck!
Pumpkin Cake repeated. The cakes froze where they stood.
Those were their first words,
Mrs. Cake said, her voice expressing an odd mix of pride and dismay. Should we do something? Mr. Cake asked, trying to hide a snicker but failing miserably. He didn't particularly want to admonish the fillies when they had just begun to speak, but Pinky might be another story.
No, I'm sure she'll realize it soon enough,
Mrs. Cake said dejectedly.
She was probably just so caught up with enjoying the pancakes that her mind didn't even register what she was saying.
And so, each of them picked up a filly, giving Pumpkin and Pound Cake big hugs and congratulating them for taking such a big step, even if they did privately wish that the milestone had gone a little differently. While the cakes were experiencing this precious, albeit unexpected family moment, Pinkie Pie was finishing the last of her pancakes. She had admittedly taken a bit too long to eat them in the end, so the last few bites weren't particularly warm, but they were still incredible nonetheless. Slipping slowly from her seat, her mind still processing the last hints of delicious aftertaste that remained in her mouth post-pancake, she carried her plate to the sink, rinsed it, and placed it to the side with the other dirty dishes. She remained in front of the sink for a little while longer, but when her tongue could no longer find even the slightest remnant of mouth-watering goodness, she turned away, an idea already surfacing in her mind.
Thank you so much for the pancakes!
She called as she walked out of the kitchen and into the room where the cakes were still hugging their fillies.
But you have to share them with the rest of Ponyville! Every pony needs to taste them! So, can we have a pancake party tonight? Can we?
As she said this, she couldn't help but hop up and down in excitement. Okay, Pinky, Mr. Cake said with a small grin, glancing at his wife for just a moment. We can have a pancake party. The idea of cooking pancakes for the whole town was a bit daunting, but if they could make all of Ponyville as happy as Pinky, it would be worth it.
Yay!
Pinky squeaked and hopped happily out the door and into the street to spread the good news. To her delight, Lyra was standing right outside, waiting patiently for Sugar Cube Corner to open.
The cakes are having a pancake party tonight!
Pinky exclaimed.
Tell every pony! They make the best, absolute best fucking pancakes ever!
Oh dear, said Mr. Cake.